In the far future, humans had explored many planets across the galaxy. Each planet was given a label based on how safe or dangerous it was. One planet, called DW345, had been marked as a death world. This meant it was considered too dangerous for anyone to live on. The name alone made most people avoid it completely. But Ethan Carter, a young engineer, wasn't so sure about the label. He worked aboard the exploration ship Stellar Horizon *, which had been sent to do one last check on DW345 before it was abandoned forever. Ethan had read all the reports about the planet. It circled an unstable star and was covered in thick jungles full of dangerous animals. Scientists said the air was barely breathable, and the ground shook with frequent earthquakes. But there were also strange notes in the files. Mentions of clear rivers, fertile soil, and a warm climate. To Ethan, it didn't sound like a total wasteland. Maybe the Death World label was more about fear than facts. Joining Ethan on this mission were two others: Rachel Monroe, a quiet but sharp biologist, and Daniel Hughes, a confident pilot who always seemed to have a joke ready. As their small shuttle left the safety of the Stellar Horizon and entered DW345's atmosphere, they all stared out the windows in awe. From above, the planet looked breathtaking. Vast green forests stretched as far as the eye could see, dotted with sparkling lakes and glowing patches of colorful plants. It was hard to believe such beauty could hide so much danger. When they landed, the first thing they noticed was the smell. The air was rich and earthy, unlike anything they'd experienced on sterile space stations or barren moons. Rachel immediately started scanning the area with her equipment, checking the air quality, and taking samples of nearby plants. Daniel stayed close to the shuttle, keeping an eye out for trouble. Ethan wandered a few steps away, drawn to the strange sounds coming from the jungle. Birds, or something like them, called to each other in high-pitched chirps, while rustling noises hinted at larger creatures moving just out of sight. "This place isn't what I expected," Rachel said, kneeling to examine a cluster of purple flowers. "It's almost inviting." "Don't let your guard down," Daniel warned, gripping his weapon tightly. "Inviting doesn't mean safe." Ethan nodded but couldn't shake the feeling that DW345 was more complex than its reputation suggested. As they began setting up camp, he pointed out how quiet the jungle had become. The loud calls and rustling had stopped, leaving an eerie silence behind. "It's like it knows we're here," he muttered. Rachel gave him a skeptical look. "Planets don't know things, Ethan. Let's focus on the data." But later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the team saw something they couldn't explain. Glowing lights appeared in the distance, flickering between the trees. At first, they thought it might be fireflies or some kind of bioluminescent plant. But when the lights began moving closer, forming patterns, they realized it wasn't natural. Whatever was out there seemed curious about them. Daniel raised his weapon, ready to defend the group if needed. "Stay calm," he said, though his voice betrayed his nerves. "We don't know what we're dealing with yet." Rachel grabbed her scanner, trying to get a reading, but the device went haywire. "This can't be right," she whispered, staring at the chaotic numbers flashing across the screen. Ethan stepped forward cautiously, squinting into the darkness. "Maybe it's not trying to hurt us," he suggested. "Maybe it's testing us." The lights hovered for a moment longer before retreating back into the jungle, leaving the trio stunned and unsettled. They returned to their makeshift camp, unsure of what to make of the encounter. One thing was certain: DW345 was nothing like the stories they'd heard. It was alive in ways they couldn't yet understand, and it wasn't going to give up its secrets easily. The next morning, the team woke up to the sound of chirping creatures and the faint hum of insects buzzing nearby. The jungle around them felt alive, almost like it was watching their every move. Ethan, Rachel, and Daniel packed up their gear and decided to follow the path where they had seen the glowing lights the night before. They didn't know what to expect, but curiosity pushed them forward. As they ventured deeper into the jungle, the air grew thicker and warmer. Strange plants with bright colors lined their path, some of them swaying gently even though there was no wind. Rachel stopped often to take samples, carefully cutting leaves or plucking small fruits to examine later. She was fascinated by how different everything was from Earth's ecosystems. "These plants are like nothing I've ever seen," she said, holding up a fruit that shimmered like glass. "If we can figure out how they work, it could change everything." Daniel kept scanning the trees and shadows, his hand resting on his weapon. He wasn't as excited about the plants as Rachel was. "Let's not forget where we are," he reminded them. "This place might look pretty, but it's still dangerous." Ethan nodded but couldn't help feeling hopeful. The jungle didn't feel hostile. It felt mysterious, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. As they walked, they came across a wide river with water so clear they could see fish swimming beneath the surface. The sight made them all pause. On one side of the river, the jungle was dense and wild, full of towering trees and strange noises. But on the other side, the land looked calm and peaceful, with soft grass and gentle slopes. "This doesn't make sense," Rachel said, staring at the contrast. "Why would one side be so chaotic and the other so perfect?" "It's like the planet has two faces," Ethan replied. "Maybe we're seeing its balance." They crossed the river using stepping stones, careful not to slip on the smooth surfaces. Once on the peaceful side, they noticed something odd. The ground was covered in tracks. Large claw marks dug into the dirt, and smaller prints scattered around them. Whatever had made these tracks was big, and possibly dangerous. Despite the warning signs, the area felt strangely empty. There were no growls, no rustling bushes, nothing to suggest predators were nearby. Rachel bent down to study the tracks. "These belong to something heavy, maybe one of those giant reptiles we heard about. But look, there are also smaller prints here. Could be prey animals. Or scouts," Daniel added, narrowing his eyes. "We should keep moving." They pressed on, climbing a small hill until they reached a clearing. What they saw took their breath away. In the center of the clearing stood ruins, ancient stone structures covered in moss and vines. Strange symbols were carved into the walls, worn down by time but still visible. The designs looked deliberate, like writing or art. It was clear that intelligent beings had once lived here. "This changes everything," Rachel whispered, running her fingers over the carvings. "If there was a civilization here, then this planet wasn't always a death world. Something must have happened to them." Ethan stepped closer, studying the symbols. He felt a strange pull, as if the ruins were calling to him. "Do you think they left?" Or, his voice trailed off, unsure how to finish the thought. "Or they died out," Daniel finished for him, his tone grim. "Whatever happened, we need to be careful. If this place killed them, it could kill us too." Despite the danger, none of them wanted to leave. The ruins hinted at answers, and they were determined to find them. As they explored further, they discovered tools made of metal and fragments of pottery scattered around. Some of the objects looked surprisingly advanced, far beyond what they had expected from an alien race. It was proof that whoever had built this place had been smart, resourceful, and ultimately doomed. By the time they returned to their camp that evening, the trio was exhausted but exhilarated. DW 345 was more than just a dangerous world. It was a mystery waiting to be unraveled. For the first time, they began to wonder if the Death World label had been a mistake, or if humanity was about to face its greatest challenge yet. The next day started with a sense of unease. Ethan, Rachel, and Daniel woke up to find deep claw marks gouged into the metal side of their shuttle. Whatever had made them was large, strong, and clearly not happy about their presence. The scratches looked fresh, as if they had been made during the night while the team slept. "This isn't good," Daniel muttered, running his hand over the damage. "Whatever did this knows we're here." Rachel frowned, glancing around at the jungle. "It's like the planet's testing us. First, the glowing lights, now this. What's next? Ethan didn't say anything. He felt a mix of fear and determination. They couldn't leave now, not when they were so close to understanding the planet's secrets. But he knew they had to be more careful. We need to stay alert, he finally said. If something attacks, we stick together. As they packed up their gear, the jungle seemed quieter than usual. The chirping creatures that usually filled the air with noise were silent. Even the rustling leaves stopped moving, as if the entire forest was holding its breath. It made the team feel exposed, like they were being watched from every direction. They decided to head back to the ruins, hoping to learn more about the symbols carved into the stones. On the way, they passed through another clearing where tall grass swayed gently in the breeze. At first, it seemed peaceful. But then, without warning, the ground shook violently. A low growl echoed through the air, growing louder by the second. Out of the bushes burst a pack of razor-toothed quadrupeds, creatures with sleek, armored bodies and glowing eyes. Their claws dug into the earth as they circled the group, snapping their jaws hungrily. There were at least 6 of them, each one bigger than a wolf. Panic surged through the team, but they quickly sprang into action. "Stay close," Daniel shouted, raising his weapon. He fired a shot into the air, trying to scare the creatures off, but it only made them angrier. One lunged toward Rachel, who stumbled backward, dropping her samples. Ethan grabbed a long branch and swung it at the beast, hitting it hard enough to drive it back. Rachel scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. "Use fire," she yelled, remembering how the glowing lights had reacted to light the night before. Daniel pulled out a flare and ignited it, waving it wildly in front of the predators. The bright flames startled them, causing some to retreat. Others hesitated, snarling but unwilling to get too close. The standoff lasted several tense minutes. Finally, the creatures backed away, disappearing into the jungle as quickly as they had come. The team stood there, breathing heavily, their clothes torn and faces streaked with dirt. "That was too close," Rachel said, clutching her chest. Her hands trembled as she picked up her fallen equipment. Ethan nodded, still gripping the makeshift club he'd used to defend himself. "We can't let our guard down again. Not for a second." Daniel reloaded his weapon, his expression grim. "This place doesn't mess around. If we're going to survive, we'll have to adapt, and fast." Back at the ruins, they took a moment to catch their breath. The attack had left them shaken, but it also proved something important. They could fight back. Despite the danger, they refused to give up. Each challenge they faced taught them more about DW-345 and about themselves. That evening, as they sat around a small fire, Rachel voiced what everyone was thinking. "Maybe this planet isn't a death world because it's impossible to live here," she said softly. "Maybe it's called that because surviving here is the ultimate test. And if we pass, maybe we'll find something worth staying for." Ethan stared into the flames, lost in thought. For all its dangers, DW-345 had shown them beauty, mystery, and resilience. He wondered if humanity wasn't meant to conquer this world, but to grow alongside it. The next morning, the team decided to explore deeper into the ruins. They hoped to find clues about the planet's past and why its creators had disappeared. The jungle around them seemed quieter than usual, almost as if it was giving them space to uncover the truth. Ethan led the way, his steps cautious but steady. Rachel followed closely, her bag filled with tools for examining artifacts. Daniel brought up the rear, scanning the trees for any signs of danger. As they entered the heart of the ruins, they noticed something strange. The symbols carved into the stones began to glow faintly when touched. Ethan reached out to trace one of the markings, and a soft hum filled the air. Startled, he pulled his hand back quickly. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice tinged with both excitement and unease. Rachel stepped forward, her eyes wide. "It's reacting to us," she said, touching another symbol. This time, the hum grew louder, and a section of the wall slid aside, revealing a hidden passageway. The opening was narrow, but light spilled out from within, casting eerie shadows on the ground. "This has to be important," Daniel said, gripping his weapon tightly. "Let's go, but stay sharp." They moved carefully into the passage, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Inside, they found themselves in a chamber filled with ancient machinery. Strange devices lined the room, some still humming softly despite centuries, or perhaps millennia, of disuse. In the center stood a large console covered in more glowing symbols. It looked like it had been waiting for someone to activate it. Rachel approached the console cautiously. "This might be some kind of control system," she said, studying the designs. "If we can figure out how to use it, we might learn what happened here." Ethan nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the machine was watching them. As Rachel pressed one of the symbols, a holographic image flickered to life above the console. It showed a map of the planet, dotted with glowing points connected by lines. The team stared at it in awe. "It's a network," Rachel whispered. "These must be cities, or maybe underground shelters. Look, there are tunnels connecting them all." Daniel pointed to a cluster of red dots near the center of the map. "What about these? They look different." Ethan leaned closer. "Maybe those are trouble spots, or places where something went wrong." As they studied the map, another image appeared, a recording of sorts. A figure, humanoid but clearly alien, stood before them in shimmering blue light. Its voice crackled through the speakers, speaking in a language none of them understood. But the tone was clear, urgent, almost pleading. Rachel adjusted her scanner, trying to translate the message. After a few moments, fragments of meaning began to emerge. "They're warning us," she said, her brow furrowed. "Something destroyed their civilization. They talk about an imbalance, like they took too much from the planet, and it fought back." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. So the planet didn't just kill them, it retaliated. The hologram shifted again, showing scenes of destruction. Towering spires crumbled under storms of fire, while rivers turned black with pollution. Creatures mutated into monstrous forms, attacking anything in their path. Finally, the image faded, leaving the team in stunned silence. "That's why no one survived," Daniel said quietly. "They pushed the planet too far, and it wiped them out." Rachel shook her head, her mind racing. But the planet didn't die. It healed itself. Look at how lush and full of life it is now. That means it's capable of recovery, if we don't make the same mistakes. Ethan stared at the console, deep in thought. "We've been thinking of DW-345 as hostile. But maybe it's not. Maybe it's just protective. If we can prove we're willing to respect it, maybe it'll let us stay." That night, as they returned to their camp, the weight of what they'd learned settled over them. The planet wasn't just a test of survival. It was a lesson in balance. Humanity's future on DW-345 depended on whether they could coexist with its powerful living ecosystem. And for the first time, they realized the true challenge wasn't defeating the planet. It was earning its trust. The days that followed were a blur of discovery and danger. Ethan, Rachel, and Daniel spent most of their time exploring the ruins and studying the ancient machinery they had uncovered. Each new piece of information deepened their understanding of DW-345 and its warnings. The planet's former inhabitants had been brilliant, creating a vast network of underground cities connected by tunnels. But their greed and carelessness had led to disaster. Now, the team faced a choice: leave or try to rebuild where others had failed. Their resolve was tested daily. The jungle seemed more alive than ever, responding to their presence in unpredictable ways. Plants would close around them when they lingered too long in one spot, as if trying to herd them along. Strange creatures began appearing closer to their camp, watching silently before vanishing into the shadows. It was clear the planet was testing them, pushing them to prove they could adapt without causing harm. One evening, after a long day of work, Rachel made a breakthrough. She managed to activate part of the console in the ruins, revealing a detailed map of the underground system. "This is incredible," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "If we can access these tunnels, we might find resources, food, water, even shelter. It could help us survive here indefinitely." Daniel frowned, his skepticism showing. "You're talking about living underground like moles. Are we really ready for that?" "It's not just about survival," Ethan chimed in. "It's about learning. If we stay above ground, we'll keep making the same mistakes. Down there, we can start fresh. We can show the planet we're different." Rachel nodded. "Exactly. And if we stabilize the ecosystem instead of exploiting it, maybe DW345 will let us thrive." Despite their growing confidence, the team knew they couldn't delay. The planet's core showed signs of instability, just like the records from the alien civilization had warned. Earthquakes became more frequent, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Cracks appeared in the walls of the ruins, and strange tremors rippled through the air. They realized time was running out. If they wanted to save themselves, and possibly the planet, they had to act quickly. The next morning, they gathered their tools and set off toward the nearest tunnel entrance marked on the map. The journey was grueling. Thick vines blocked their path, forcing them to cut through with knives. Sharp rocks sliced at their boots, and the humid air left them drenched in sweat. But none of them complained. Every step brought them closer to their goal. When they finally reached the entrance, they found themselves standing before a massive stone door covered in glowing symbols. Rachel recognized the markings from the ruins and pressed her hand against one of them. With a low rumble, the door slid open, revealing a dark passageway lit faintly by bioluminescent fungi growing on the walls. Inside, the air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of earth and metal. The tunnel stretched endlessly in both directions, branching off into smaller paths. The team moved cautiously, marking their route with glow sticks to avoid getting lost. As they ventured deeper, they discovered storage rooms filled with preserved food, advanced tools, and even water filtration systems. It was as if the planet had prepared everything they needed to begin again. "This changes everything," Ethan said, his voice echoing softly in the cavern. "We can do this. We can live here, not as conquerors, but as caretakers." Rachel smiled, her eyes shining with hope. DW345 isn't just a death world. It's a second chance, for us, and for humanity. But Daniel remained cautious. "Let's not celebrate yet. This place is still dangerous. We've got a lot of work ahead of us." As they continued exploring, the weight of their mission settled over them. They weren't just surviving. They were building something new. For the first time, they felt like pioneers, carving out a future in harmony with a world that had once been called impossible. The team worked tirelessly over the next few days, piecing together how to use the ancient machinery they had discovered. The tunnels beneath DW345 were a treasure trove of technology, but much of it was damaged or powered down. Rachel spent hours studying the control panels, her fingers tracing over symbols and buttons as she tried to decipher their functions. Ethan helped by repairing broken parts, using tools from their shuttle and scraps salvaged from the ruins. Daniel kept watch, ensuring no unexpected dangers crept up on them while they worked. Their efforts paid off when Rachel finally managed to activate one of the machines. It hummed to life, lighting up the cavern with a soft glow. A holographic display appeared, showing the planet's core surrounded by swirling energy patterns. "This is it," Rachel said, her voice filled with awe. "This system controls the planet's stability. If we can recalibrate it, we might stop the earthquakes and prevent another collapse." Ethan nodded, his eyes fixed on the display. "But we need to be careful. Messing with something this powerful could make things worse." Daniel stepped closer, his expression serious. "Then let's not mess up." Together, they devised a plan. Rachel would guide them through the process, explaining each step as they went. Ethan handled the physical repairs, reconnecting wires and stabilizing damaged components. Daniel stood ready to intervene if anything went wrong, keeping an eye on both the machine and the tunnels around them. As they worked, the planet seemed to respond. The ground trembled less frequently, and the air in the tunnels grew calmer. Even the strange creatures that had been watching them from the shadows began to retreat, as if sensing the balance being restored. It was as though DW-345 was giving them a chance to succeed. Finally, after what felt like endless hours, they reached the final step. Rachel instructed Ethan to turn a dial slowly while she monitored the readings on the display. "Steady," she said, her voice tense. "Almost there." The machine emitted a deep, resonant hum, and the glowing patterns on the display shifted into alignment. For a moment, everything was still. Then, a wave of energy pulsed through the tunnels, spreading outward across the planet. The walls shimmered faintly, and the bioluminescent fungi brightened, casting a warm light throughout the cavern. "It worked," Ethan breathed, leaning against the console in relief. "We did it." Rachel smiled, tears welling up in her eyes. "We stabilized the core. The planet, it's healing itself." Daniel let out a long sigh, lowering his weapon for the first time in days. "Guess we earned our stay here." But their victory wasn't without cost. The effort had taken its toll on all of them. Their clothes were torn, their bodies ached, and exhaustion weighed heavily on their shoulders. Still, they felt a sense of accomplishment they had never known before. They had faced the planet's challenges head-on and proven they could adapt, not by dominating, but by cooperating. That night, they returned to the surface to see the results of their work. The jungle looked even more vibrant than before, with plants glowing softly under the moonlight. The rivers sparkled, and the air felt cleaner, fresher. Even the creatures seemed less aggressive, moving through the forest with calm purpose. Sitting around a small fire, the trio reflected on everything they had been through. "We came here thinking this place was a death sentence," Ethan said, staring into the flames. "But now, I think it's a gift, a chance to start over." Rachel nodded, wrapping her arms around her knees. "DW-345 isn't just a planet. It's alive, and it gave us a second chance because we showed we could respect it." Daniel smirked, poking at the fire with a stick. "Just don't screw it up this time, okay?" They laughed, the sound carrying into the quiet night. For the first time since arriving, they felt hopeful. Humanity's future on DW-345 wasn't guaranteed, but they had taken the first steps toward building something sustainable. They weren't just survivors. They were pioneers, learning to live alongside a world that had once been called impossible. And as they gazed up at the stars, they knew their story was only beginning. Weeks turned into months, and Ethan, Rachel, and Daniel settled into a rhythm on DW-345. They worked together to repair more of the ancient machinery, unlocking new parts of the underground network. Each discovery brought them closer to understanding the planet and themselves. The tunnels became their home, filled with light from glowing fungi and powered by the stabilized core. They learned to farm edible plants they found in the jungle, using the fertile soil and clean water from the filtration systems. Slowly but surely, they began to build a life. The planet seemed to respond to their efforts. Earthquakes stopped completely, and the jungle thrived like never before. Strange creatures that once seemed hostile now kept their distance, watching curiously, but no longer attacking. It was as if DW-345 had accepted them, or at least decided to give them a chance. One day, a rescue ship finally arrived. The Stellar Horizon had sent word to headquarters about the team's extended stay, and a larger vessel was dispatched to bring them back. When the ship descended through the atmosphere, its engines roaring, Ethan, Rachel, and Daniel stood side by side, watching it land. But none of them moved toward it. "You know," Rachel said softly, breaking the silence, "we don't have to leave." Ethan nodded, his eyes fixed on the jungle. "This place, it's become our home. We've done so much here already." If we go back, who knows what will happen to this planet? Daniel crossed his arms, thinking for a moment. It's not just about us anymore. If we leave, someone else might come here and mess it up. Someone who doesn't understand what this world needs. The three of them exchanged glances, silently agreeing. When the rescue crew stepped off the ship, expecting to find desperate survivors, they were surprised by what they saw instead. Ethan, Rachel, and Daniel greeted them warmly, but explained their decision to stay. They shared their findings, showing the crew how HFY-345 could sustain human life, if treated with care. At first, the rescuers were skeptical. "You've been out here too long," one of them said. "You're talking about staying on a death world." "It's not a death world," Rachel replied firmly. "That label was wrong. This is a paradise, if you know how to live here." Eventually, the crew agreed to take their report back to headquarters. Before leaving, they promised to send supplies and volunteers willing to help establish a sustainable colony. As the ship lifted off, Ethan, Rachel, and Daniel waved goodbye, knowing their work was far from over. In the months that followed, news of their success spread across the galaxy. Scientists and settlers alike were inspired by their story. HFY-345 went from being dismissed as uninhabitable to being seen as a beacon of hope, a reminder that humanity could adapt and thrive even in the harshest environments. For Ethan, Rachel, and Daniel, every day brought new challenges and discoveries. They taught newcomers how to respect the planet, sharing everything they had learned about its rhythms and secrets. Together, they built a community that worked with HFY-345 instead of against it. Crops grew, children played under the glowing trees, and the underground cities hummed with life. As time passed, the planet continued to reward their efforts. Rivers flowed clearer, skies stayed bright, and the strange lights they had seen on their first night returned, dancing playfully in the distance. It was as if HFY-345 itself was celebrating. Looking back, Ethan realized something important. Humanity hadn't conquered this world. They had earned its trust. By listening, adapting, and respecting its power, they had turned a so-called death world into a true paradise. And in doing so, they had proven that even in the face of impossible odds, people could find a way to endure and flourish. Under alien stars, a new chapter of human history began.